Well, I'm here today with one of the great winemakers of Margaret River, Cliff Royle, who is the winemaker at Flametree. He's been there for nearly 30 years, I think, Cliff, is that right?
15 years at Flametree, yeah.
Sorry, 15, but you've been making wine for
right. Yeah, I was at
a long
Voyager
time.
Before that. Yeah.
He was at Voyager Estate before Flametree. A bit of a Chardonnay specialist, makes great Cabernet, makes great Sauvignon Blanc, but the Chardonnay, I think, is really up there with the best in Margaret River. And today we're tasting the new release Flametree Chardonnay 2024 and the SRS, which stands for Sub-Regional Series Chardonnay Flametree 2023, which is the big brother. So talking about cost, your regular Chardonnay was always one of the great values. I reckon it was $30, $35 for a long time, and now it's gone up to 40, I think. Obviously you were making probably a fairly slim margin on that for a while. And the 24, maybe we should taste it. The 24 was a tricky year, wasn't it? I think everybody was a month ahead of normal in Western Australia.
So we started before Australia Day for the first time ever. And never having done that before, we were in uncharted waters, but it was like everything was 3 weeks early. So even from flowering. So we just had warm nights and warm days where we would normally get the warm days, but we'd have cool nights because we get those nice southerly breezes that come off the Great Southern Ocean. So it was one of those really interesting vintages that I've never really experienced in my nearly 30 years of making wine in the region. It was, just so much warmer. And then I thought, would the wines show that? And they don't appear to. So maybe everything just got shifted rather than...
So going back to Budburst, is this mainly to do with the dryness rather than the heat?
It is.
Everything was so forward. That's right. Picking was forward, flowering was forward,
that's right.
Veraison, harvest, everything was forward.
That's right.
In the Swan Valley, they were talking about a month earlier, and for you 3 weeks. It's a lot.
It is.
And does that mean that your grapes are ripening in a hotter weather, or how was it actual harvest?
It turned out like that. We don't normally get the heat until that January, February period, but we were getting 40-degree temperatures in December, and we'd never seen anything like it. So it just literally was the perfect storm. It just kept maintaining that heat and those hot nights where we just were burning off the acid and not getting those cool breezes. So I was always skeptical about whether or not the Chardonnays would end up being quite tropical and lacking a bit of acid. We certainly didn't need to work too much texture into the wines or do much lees stirring or anything like that because the wines were already quite fruit forward. But they've still got really nice structure and good zip, and the numbers are not that dissimilar to what they would normally be.
No malolactic, obviously, but you don't do that anyway, do you?
No, we don't. No.
And so were you harvesting at a lower Beaumet to get the freshness in the wine?
Not really. The wine still came in around that 13.2 that they sort of normally sit at. Our wines go anywhere between high 12s and 13.5 at the most. This year, this wine, the Flametree's 13.2 and the SRS, but that's a 23 is 13.5, and the SRS from 24 is 13.5. So, it's interesting. The balance of the wines is still pretty solid.
Well, maybe we should talk about Flametree itself, and because Flametree, I mean, if you're a Western Australian, you know what a Flametree is, but the rest of us don't so much. I just think of the Jimmy Barnes song.
And that's where the name came from.
Did it?
Yeah, the owner was telling me, they were always big Jimmy Barnes fans, loved that song, but then it sort of evolved more into a brand and the flower of the Flametree and how we can put that into a label.
Because it's a Western Australian tree, isn't it?
It is,
What's its...
Well,
it's not a eucalypt, is it?
No, that's right. I mean, it's a strange tree because it doesn't always flower, and when it does, it drops all its leaves and then flowers. So you basically, from the air, that got its name because it looks like it's on fire. So it can be this crazy tree that's in the middle of a paddock and it's got all these bright red flowers on it and no leaves.
No leaves.
Yeah, and it only happens when conditions are really good. It will go into full bloom. It can go 3 or 4 years without having any flowers, and then all of a sudden gets the right nutrient and the right rainfall and goes into full bloom, and it looks amazing. So we've got a couple of different types of. We've got some Illawarras as well, which the leaves go red on those. So that's a different type of Flametree, but the traditional one is the one that literally drops its leaves and goes completely red in flower. Yeah. It looks amazing.
And you have a little representation of it on the label.
That's right. Yeah, just basically the leaves overlaying each other. I was always attracted to the brand. I thought, it obviously got off to a great start with the Jimmy Watson Trophy. And
were you the original winemaker?
No, Jeremy Gordon.
Yeah. He won the Watson.
That's right. Yeah, so he was the winemaker there for the first 3 years, 07, 8 and 9, and then I made the wines from 10 onwards. Yeah.
From 10 onwards, so you've put in a fair innings there.
Yeah, I have. Yeah.
So something to do with stability, I think. I always think the great wines, the great wineries have stability of not just ownership and winemaking staff. I think is important. Not vital, but certainly important. I think.
No.
And the SRS stands for Sub-Regional Series. A lot of people doing individual vineyard wines. Perhaps not so many doing individual sub-region wines, but it's an interesting thing in Margaret, isn't it?
It is.
The cooler climates down in the south tend to produce the white varieties that people are after, and Cabernet does great in the north, doesn't it? Because it's a bit warmer.
That's right, and that's one of the things that we talk to people about a lot, is that the region's over 100 kilometres long, and so from north to south you could be talking about 5 degrees difference in any day. And I drive from Margaret River up to Flametree every day, and it's up in Yallingup, or that road that goes between Dunsborough and Bustleton, and it's 5 degrees every day. So if I go further south to Carradar or down to Augusta, it can be up to another 2 degrees cooler. So you're talking almost 7 degrees from north to south. So that's significant.
That's amazing, and it's all to do with the water currents, isn't it?
That's right.
The Southern Ocean meets the Indian Ocean.
That's right, yeah. And you can really feel the breeze from that great Southern Ocean as you're heading further south. And one of the reasons why it is so much cooler down there is because that air gets to those regions first, and it has longer to cool them. By the time it gets to the north, that breeze has already started to warm through the valleys, so it doesn't have the same effect as when it's hitting straight off the ocean.
So it doesn't come sort of directly from the west, it comes up from further south.
That's right, yeah. And it is the number one thing that I believe, personally, that makes the Margaret River wines what they are. I mean, having that classic maritime influence, the Indian Ocean to the west and to the north, and then the Great Southern Ocean to the south. And those ocean currents, you can really feel it even when you go for a swim. You can tell when the water temperature changes and the currents, it's all of a sudden you're starting to get a bit of that warm ocean current coming down from the north. And most of the time we've got that southern current, and it's freezing and it's really cold swimming most of the year.
So going from north to south, the unofficial sub-regions would be Yallingup or Dunsborough?
That's right, so it's Yallingup, then it's Williabra, then it's Warcliffe, and then it's Carradale going down the coast, and then you've got Carbonup and Treaton to the east. So you've got the 6 sub-regions.
Can't see Treaton being a very useful name. It just doesn't have the character of the other names.
It doesn't. And it's not widely talked about because they're vineyards that are largely on the eastern side of the Bustle Highway. And so the soils can be quite different in there, quite kelpy and quite deep and rich. And so not everybody, but there are pockets in there, like Victory Point have got a vineyard in Treaton, Rick Cullen's got a vineyard in Treaton, and those couple of vineyards produce excellent fruit. So there are, as always, exceptions to the rules.
And the really good gravelly soils, which Cabernet loves so much, they're up in this Williabra area that we were just talking about.
That's right, yeah.
So it's a combination of the soils and the climate that makes Cabernet so good up there.
Absolutely. And also north-facing vineyards, so they get that all afternoon sun, whereas this SRS wine comes from a southern-facing vineyard, so we don't want that 3 o'clock on till 6 sun on Chardonnay because it's extreme, and we think that it makes a really big difference having south or southeast-facing Chardonnay vineyards.
And it's a pretty flat area generally. I mean, some areas you might have a slope which would shield you from the hot afternoon sun, but not in Margaret River so much.
No, that's right. I mean, compared to Coonawarra, we're like the Swiss Alps. So, there is that. We do have quite obvious. And then the great thing about that is you get that runoff if you do get any rain.
It's undulating.
It is undulating, and there are some quite significant vineyards that slope off to the south and southeast, and then obviously to the north as well. Mark Jolliffe's vineyard's on quite a hill, and it's all that really rocky pea gravel, and that's what makes it what it is. And he worked really hard to establish it. So I'm not totally across dry grown vineyards being established without any water at all. I think that the whole treat them mean and make them work type attitude towards grapevines is not necessarily
not when they're babies
on
anyway.
Point, no.
You've got to be kind to them when they're babies.
That's right. So I would have thought establishing them, getting them a good root system, and then maybe making them work a little. But with grapevines, it's really easy to tell when they need some assistance. And I've always talked about irrigation as a management tool. If you have it, you can use it. And in years like 24, absolutely there were vineyards dying, and there were big trees that have been there for hundreds of years dying. I mean, it was really dry, and the vines were stressed. You could tell the tendrils were drooping, the leaves were cupping, they were stopping photosynthesizing, they weren't functioning. And when that starts to happen, it's got to affect the fruit. The funny thing is, Wallcliffe seems to be cooler than Carradale, even though Carradale's further south. So with the climate data we've got, so there's definitely, for me, the wines in Wallcliffe, as you know, I've always preferred that sub-region, and the wines of Voyager always had that beautiful grapefruit pith character that I think sits nicely with the sort of savouriness of that struck match character with the sulphide. I just think they work really nicely as foil to each other.
Is the grapefruity thing more a matter of the Gingin clone, or is it
I think
across
so.
all
No, I think so.
clones?
It's definitely, for me, it's Gingin. I mean, we play around with 95, 96 and 277 and 76 and a little bit of P58, and they bring different things, but they're more structural, and they certainly don't have the grapefruit element.
Yours are always blends of clones, aren't they?
Yeah, this is a blend of clones. I mean, we get some of the Victory Point fruit, and that's got quite a lot of the clonal material in it. And I think we've obviously got a fair bit of clonal material from the Dan and Dan panel initially, because he was bringing in a lot of those clones and planted them at Voyager, and we really liked them. They gave great structure to the wine, but we've all gone back to the Gingin earlier picking because we think it still gives the right amount of tannin in the wine and the right fruit weight that comes from Margaret River. You just got to handle it a little differently.
Do you want to tell us a bit about Gingin, because it's basically a diseased clone, isn't it? That gives you hen and chicken.
It is, and it's the smaller berries obviously have a lot of acid in them, and the larger berries just generally have a little bit more flavour. But a whole bunch pressing them seems to work really nicely. You get a nice balance of juice.
So the little berries are not so small that they don't crush.
No, that's right. No, they're still. So a lot of people see those berries as potentially they haven't developed properly, but they have. They've developed perfectly, and they just are a different beast to the large berry on the same bunch. So it's a really strange phenomenon, and I've often talked to guys like Glenn Goodall about he's done some taking the bigger berries off and looking at the little berries and seeing the difference, and you can see about 2 grams of acid more in the small berries.
That's a
but
lot.
the Beaumets are about the same.
Oh, fascinating.
Yeah.
So it's a virus, isn't it?
That's right.
So the whole clone has a virus which causes it to set bigger and smaller berries on the same bunch.
That's right. Yeah. And it produces fantastic wine. I mean, I don't know anybody in Margaret River who wouldn't. There's a few people who like the Davis clone, just because it's a little bit more straight down the line. It doesn't have as much sideways movement in the palate profile, and they like those leaner, tighter, sort of, I guess, Chablis-esque, if you like, style wines. But for me, I think you can handle Gingin and still get that nice focus.
So let's have a taste.
Yeah, absolutely.
Did you bring them to look at or to taste?
No. I brought them to taste for sure. I would normally give them a little decant, but you're a professional.
That's all right. I can handle a bit of reduction first thing in the morning. So this is the 2024
That's right.
Flametree Chardonnay, the regular Chardonnay.
Yeah, that's right.
It's pretty easy to buy around it's a well distributed wine.
Yeah, and we'll probably see this creep up to $45, and we'd like to keep it there at around that $45. I think that's probably worthy. And look, we have backed the oak off a little bit, so this used to be probably 25%, 30% new oak. Now it's about 15%, and it's a mixture of puncheon and barrels. So I really like puncheons. They seem to work really well with our fruit, and you seem to retain acidity and sulphur a lot better in puncheon for some strange reason, and the wines do seem to have this bit more purity to them. So we've definitely gone a lot more towards puncheon, and this is 100% puncheon.
Yeah, you were one of the first winemakers I heard talking about puncheons in Chardonnay.
That's right.
Going quite a way back.
That's right. Yeah. So we were the first. Yeah, we were the first to use puncheons on Chardonnay. But there were a few people playing around with some larger format, but I think it was more 300s. But yeah, there was a few guys doing it in the Yarra Valley for a little while, and I liked what I saw, and I thought, oh, let's have a try at that.
So puncheon's what, 500 litres?
That's right. Yeah.
And a barrique is 330.
225.
225 rather.
Yeah.
But you talk about 300 litre barrels.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, some people use the hogs, and they seem to like that. I've tried them and don't see the point. It's pretty well like a barrel. So I prefer to use the 500s. And then we take, once these are 5 or 6 years old, we then put them onto our Shiraz. So in the SRS range, we actually make a terroir as well, which is basically, as you know, a French term for a frustrated winemaker making Shiraz in a place that really they want to be making Pinot in.
We won't go there.
So, no.
But this is very clean. This is
it is.
Not a reductive style.
No, it's not. No.
I think we see more of that in the SRS, don't we?
Yeah, we do. So there's a little bit of that sea spray, but what I can see in this year's wines is more of that yellow citrus, stone fruit, and rather than the citrus we'd normally see. We normally see a bit more lime and grapefruit, and this I'm seeing a bit more yellow nectarine and peach, and that's the spectrum, and I guess you'd expect that in a warm year.
Yes, it doesn't have particular one thing or the other to me. It's got some grapefruit, but it's not dominating it. It's a nice balance of flavours and aromas, I think. It's drinking well now. This is it's emerged quite well, considering you released it a bit earlier than you wanted to.
That's right. I mean, we've been tasting it with the consumers over the last couple of days and the trade, and I've been a little bit surprised, because normally a wine 2 months after bottling would be almost at its worst, in that it would have shut down pretty significantly. But I think that shows the vintage, that the wines are going to drink early, and I don't think they're going to be quite as long-lived as classic vintages like 22 and 23.
Yeah.
But that's all right. I mean, the consumer, these wines are to be consumed in 3 to 5 years. I wouldn't say that people should be aging Chardonnays forever.
Sure. Unless they've put it at the back of the cellar and forgotten about it, which a lot of us do, don't we?
Well, yeah. I don't know, as I sort of get a bit older, it's probably one of the things I get asked the most: how long do I age wine for? Wow, what a tough question.
How long is a piece of string? And how do you like to taste your wine? Do you like it mature or do you like it young?
Yeah, that's right.
That's the question, isn't it?
That's right.
Some people turn their nose up at anything that's got a bit of gold in the colour.
Yeah. I like them medium age. I think in Chardonnays at 5 to that sort of 8 to maybe 10 at the most, but I think beyond that they do start to get a little bit too much of that waxy, almost secondary character that then starts to take away from the fruit a little bit. It's like champagne. I don't really like it with too much age on it, because then it starts to change from what it was.
We had a 73 Krug 2 nights ago.
It was pretty good.
And that's, it's ancient. It's a curio. It's in the curio class.
Yeah, it is.
But I can still enjoy it.
Yeah.
So some of us, I mean, some people are incapable of adjusting their thinking to an old wine.
That's right, yeah.
And the older I get, the more I appreciate old wines.
Oh, of course. Yeah, absolutely. I really like older reds in particular, and I can drink the Chardonnays. I just find some of them, the fruit starts to dry out a bit, and you're sort of left with this tannic back palate with developed bottle age character rather than fruit, and then it starts to change the experience a little bit for me. I appreciate them, and they make me think, but do I really love them? Not always. So it's sort of almost dependent on the wine and the wine style.
Well, it's a bit like Hunter Semillon, you know.
Yeah,
so
that's right.
You can drink them young, you can drink them old, you can drink them somewhere in between, and they can all be delicious.
That's right. Yeah.
Suit the occasion.
Yeah.
But what I like about Chardonnay with 2 or 3 or maybe 5 years of age on it, a good one develops that lovely roasted hazelnut character. And a bit of butteriness, even if it hasn't had a male out, they can develop a bit of butteriness and adds to the complexity.
Yeah, yeah, I agree with that.
So should we try the
SRS?
The SRS?
Yeah. For me, I've always maintained, and as you know, that Margaret River Chardonnay's got so much texture and weight that it doesn't need any more. And if I've had one criticism aimed at Margaret River Chardonnay from some of the producers on the eastern states, that I do joke probably can't get the same fruit power that we've got, and it's more of a jealousy thing. But also some of my French friends who say to me, there's too much sunshine, there's too much fruit weight, there's too much fruit sweetness. And I think that's really what they're saying, is that a lot of Australian wines finish fruit sweet on the back palate. They'd like to see the wines finish finer and more tannic and structured and flinty and come in a bit rather than go out at the back palate.
So getting back to this wine, it's certainly got much more of that flinty, smoky, reductive character. When you first pour it, I suspect if it sits in the glass or it's decanted, that will dissipate somewhat.
Exactly, yeah.
And the colder it is, the more that stays in the wine.
That's right, too. That's right, yeah. So this is, I like the sulphides because I think they sit nicely with that sort of smoky grapefruit, and we use all light long toast puncheons from Mercury and Francois Freya that seem to be classic Burgundian style oaks. Nice, 3
So these are Burgundy cooperages, aren't
That's
they?
right, that's right. And I think they just lean themselves into Chardonnay really nicely and sit with that solids. Some of them, sometimes you make a wine and you think it's pretty smart and nobody really takes much notice of it, and then you make one and you go, oh, that actually looks, it's a bit shy or it's a bit quiet, and then everyone goes crazy for it. So wine's a funny thing because it's a snapshot in time, and even a month ago this wine was a little bit, it had less of that solids character, but there and then it won, a whole host of trophies at
But you talk about solids, and it is wild ferment and high solids juice.
That's
does
right.
produce this more, doesn't it?
That's right, yeah. So we'll typically look at solids levels at around 400 NTU, which is just a turbidity measurement, and then we'll 600 and 800. And generally the puncheons that I do at 800 will be the puncheons that I prefer the most. And there's a few things going on.
So they're the ones that are the most cloudy.
Yeah, that's right. They've got the highest turbidity, and they've also got the most nutrient when you think about it. So the two things that wild ferments don't like, really clean juices and higher alcohols. So if you can get your alcohol down to start with and your nutrient level up, then you don't have any problems with stuck ferments or attenuated ferments. But at the end of the ferment, you'll get this little bit of sulfide, and we'll ride that wave, and we'll see it as a positive sulfide because you don't want mercaptans. I mean, for me, the greatest wines that I've ever had, and people go crazy for Coche and Rouleau and Leflaive and of yesteryear and Yves Colomeret nowadays and all these sorts of wines, I mean, they all have an element of sulfide in them, all of those wines. And for me, more than anything, and it's, some people say, oh, you're playing the man and not the ball, because you're trying to suck people into liking this style of wine because it's quite salivating and it's got that sea spray and whatever. And I said, no, I'm trying to shape the wine in a way that brings the back palate in and allows a bit of phenolic, like you see in some of the great wines. We're not trying to make Burgundy, but what we're trying to do is understand why those wines are regarded as the great wines of the world. and they are a little less fruited on the back palate, and they do have this lovely little grip. We've been taught to scrub that out in our wines.
Yeah. Spring water fresh, no phenolics.
Exactly, and they have a little bit of grip, and I really like it. And I think the wild ferment with the solids more than anything tails the wine back into a more savoury palate, which is more food friendly and also gives longevity to age.
And it's more fascinating to drink.
Absolutely,
More
absolutely.
complex.
I mean, wines that to me smell great generally change beautifully in the glass, and they make you think a little bit more. I want to be taken on a journey with the wine.
I think there's a bit of the stinky cheese thing too. Stinky cheeses are the most interesting quite often. Good French cheeses that have got a bit of a pong to them have fantastic flavour.
That's right. Yeah.
So if we tolerate it in cheese, we should tolerate it in other things. But that is a fabulous wine. I think I can see why it's won lots of trophies. It's got great complexity, and it's got that wonderful core of a really rich concentrated fruit, which you get in Margaret River. But it's fine and elegant at the same time. It's not big and blousy. It's very tight and together.
Yeah.
And the length of palate is extraordinary. And that's the 23 SRS.
That's right, yeah. It's only just come out. Both these wines are current vintage.
What's the price of the SRS?
The SRS is retailing for $90 now. Yeah,
$90, and a lot of wines in Margaret River now are over $100. So
that's right.
It's still below 100, which is something.
Yeah, that's right.
So gorgeous.
And we make 250 cases or 500 six-packs, so it's not a lot of wine. But on the back of that, we sell a lot of this wine. But yeah, we're sometimes, like I said, sometimes you make a wine and it just happens to come out nicely, and then other times you have to work a bit harder. And I think Julian Langworthy went on record recently as saying that 23 is the best Chardonnay vintage he's ever been involved with. I'd certainly concur with that. It's a really good vintage.
Yeah, and Julian's a bit of a master of sulphide too, isn't he?
Yeah, he is. And his own wine, I don't know whether you've seen his new Nocturne 23, but if you do, it's almost, it's more than this, it's almost into the Bono type sulphide, Bono de Matre sulphide. So,
the other one I like, I used to like, I haven't seen it for years, is Ramonet.
Yeah.
They do a pretty complex wine.
They do, yeah. I think it's still one of the best wines I've ever had with Stuart. I had it with Stuart Pym way back in the day in '89. Bienvenue Batard from Ramonet. Yeah, it was a beautiful wine. One of my top 5.
So Cliff Royle, what is it about Margaret River and Chardonnay? They seem to go together so beautifully. Some of the greatest Chardonnays in Australia are coming from Margaret River. Is there some hidden mystery factor that we should know about?
No, I think it's a combination of a few things, and it is a question that we get asked a lot, and we sort of lead with the maritime influence. There's no doubt that those cooler evenings that retain that natural acidity and that beautiful perfume in the wines is key. I think the Gingin clone is definitely a nice foil for our fruit flavour and that lovely natural acidity. Talk to people like Glenn Goodall, he always talks about this salty margarita, limey acidity in the wines, and I see that at varying levels in a lot of good Chardonnays from Margaret River. I think also the consistency of vintage from year to year, that's probably Margaret River's biggest asset, is from year to year we don't see a lot of variability in vintage conditions. We generally get all our rainfall during winter, and we don't get a lot of rainfall during harvest, so from year to year we see very consistent vintages.
Yes, I think when you talk about the cool evening breezes, you're right there on the Southern Ocean and the Indian Ocean confluence, and I guess the weather comes from the west, so you do get the cool breezes.
That's right.
But Burgundy is an inland region. It's continental climate, very different to Margaret River.
That's right.
Is it just that Chardonnay is a great traveller? It does well in a variety of different places?
I think it does, and it is a bit of a strange one, because you'd think that Chardonnay would do better inland and that Cabernet would be the one that would be maritime. If you look at Bulgari and you look at Napa and you look at Bordeaux, they're all pretty close to the water, so the maritime influence is probably better suited to Cabernet, if you like, but we think Chardonnay in Margaret River is probably has overtaken Cabernet as the #1 grape variety, and it just seems to work really well where we are.
Everybody wants Chardonnay. I'd imagine the Chardonnay plantings would be bigger than the Cabernet plantings, would they?
They are, yeah, but not too much. And Cabernet is a different subject for another day. But certainly, I think people are making the Cabernets in a different sort of style, and we're definitely seeing people coming back to them in the market.